and jumping, them boys up to something. They just spent like 2 or 3 weeks out the country. Them boys up to something, they just bluffing.
How's it going, guys? Welcome. We're excited to have you here on Free Academy Live. This is actually our second episode, so super cool. I'm Jared Reyes. This is Sean Magin, and we'll kind of jump right in. I think Sean's coming all the way from New Zealand, so pretty exciting to have him as part of the Free Academy and kind of hear a lot about what he's up to now.
Yeah, sure, man. It's awesome. Jared and I both spent some time on the sailboat with Michael during his whole time going from Texas to the Bahamas and back, or Texas to the Caribbean and back. Went as far as Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands at some points. And we nonstop talk about the effects of just like shattering the typical American dream and and putting ourselves in those extreme travel situations and how that's played out for us. And I think that's something we kind of want to jump into on this talk, as well as other various topics.
Yeah, and I think, well, I guess, I said this during our buddy Michael, he's selling his book right now, kind of on a book tour throughout the U.S. at the moment. He'll be at Anarchapulco in February, so he's getting beyond the U.S. to sell his book, Sailboat Diaries 2, which is about the sailing trip, but also all his adventures leading up to it and whatnot. But at one of his book things, we've all kind of mentioned some of what we got out of the sailing trip, and I think we could have, we could have so many conversations, and they could all be so different because, I just got so much out of the trip. But I think one of the cool things is we all have this big ideological overlap in our beliefs. But if you asked each one of us before the trip what our primary motivation for doing it was, I bet they'd all be different. So even though we share a lot of beliefs, we all jumped on that boat, I think, for different reasons, at least the primary reason. And I think that's so fascinating. I think my primary reason I jumped on the boat was, it's hard looking back, it's hard, but I think the biggest thing was the isolation of it, because when I was on the boat, it was just me and Michael, and I had never really put myself in a situation like that. And I'd forgotten that was the main fear I had. But then when I go back and I reread my journal, that's all I write about on the plane ride from when I went to go meet up with him in Miami. Is all I was writing about was I've never been isolated like this before. I'm really excited to combat this fear and whatnot. And so I think that was probably my biggest reason from the jump. What do you think yours was?
Man, mine is probably just butting heads against authority. I was raised in a situation where I was the youngest child of 3. And so there was always this hierarchy, and I was always just being delivered orders, and I never really got to, it's like I spent my whole life just butting heads against this hierarchy essentially. And so that was another form of it. And, so like I said, in one of Michael's book releases, I left wanting to show all the people that said that we couldn't do it, that we could, and to prove something, to them and then blow their minds. But in the end, the most important piece of the whole journey was that I blew my own mind. Growing up in the States, our American dream, quote unquote, is that you come out of college, you get a nice paying job, and then you get a family and a house and car and dog and all that. And that's the end of it. So when I'm 22 and sailing on a boat thousands of miles to places that I hadn't even traveled to on a plane, I kind of shattered all of my expectations for what my life would be. And I think the biggest effect at the end of the trip was that I started to take ownership for my biography. No longer was I just going with the flow in some quote unquote dream that was thrust upon me that I just assumed I had to follow. But now I took full and complete responsibility for myself and realized that look, it's either you do this now or you will be the one regretting it later. And, there's nobody else to blame but yourself. And so I've kind of taken that lesson to heart and just continued traveling on afterwards. And, and then ended up in New Zealand reluctantly. And I'll explain that story here in a bit. It's
Yeah,
pretty
man,
wild. So
that's fascinating. I think it was the same thing for me. And I remember when I decided I was going to do it, and I told Mike and I committed, and he had a lot of people that had said or expressed interest, but then they would flake out, and when I committed, he's a little like, okay, yeah, excited, but a little hesitant to believe that I'd actually get on that boat. But I remember committing to him, and then I started, I called my mom and I was like, hey mom, I know I'm going to Europe and then I'm going to be in Honduras, but I wanted to let you know after those trips, I'm going to go on a sailing trip with my buddy Michael Fielding. And she had heard his name a little bit, but not that much, and she's like, well, who's Michael again? I told her. And she's like, what do you mean sailing? Like, where are you guys going to go? And I was like, well, I think I'm going to meet up with him somewhere in Miami and then try and make it to South America. And I remember her being like, do you even know how to sail? And I was like, kind of, I went out there for a day and like got the basics, but and she's like, isn't this hurricane season? And I was like, yeah, it is hurricane season, and she's like, what the hell are you doing? And she's like, I don't think this is a good idea. And I was like, mom, I love you and I respect everything you have to say, but like, I called out of respect for you, but not really asking permission. Like, this is something I feel like I need to do. And it was like terrifying and exciting. And she wasn't convinced I was actually going to do it, I think. And that was the response I got from all my friends. Like when I was in Europe, I went on this Europe trip with 39 other people. And when I told them, I think because they'd ask, well, what are you doing after this? And most of them had already committed to jobs once they got back from Europe. And so this was like their little recess before they jumped into real world. Whereas me, I was viewing it as this is just the beginning of what I want the rest of my life to be.
Yeah.
And I would tell them when they would ask, what was up. I was like, oh, well, I got a couple trips planned after this. And they would hear the sailing thing. There's no way you're going to sail from there to South America during hurricane season with like almost no experience and everything. So I had a little bit of that, like, I want to show people that I'm going to do what I said, So I had some, everyone's doubting that I'll actually get on this boat, and I need to prove it to myself that I was actually going to do it. And thank God I did, because it's so empowering. Like I feel like I just learned so much about my capabilities and how, as you said, we can take control of our own life. You can actually find a way to live out all these passions and all these ideas and dreams and these crazy adventures. We can actually do it. And I think going on the sailing trip specifically proved to myself that that we can do it. We just jumped on a boat. I think almost really none of us had the appropriate level of experience, to do a trip like that. And we all jumped on and we all screwed up 1,000 times, but we made it,
Yeah. I think it illuminates like a very, a very fine lesson in life, that there's not much that really separates the winners from the losers and the successful people from the unsuccessful people. It's just the simple things like you're saying, like staying true to your word and challenging yourself to the fullest and working really hard to do that. It's not like it was, we say this all the time, and when we talk about it, it's like we only highlight the good parts, but man, it was work to be out there in such hardcore isolation and, be sailing for 3 days at a time and spin a 360 and not see any land. Like it gets a bit depressing and you get a bit scared and get a bit excited. It's a little bit of everything. It's a mental drain. And especially when you've just spent 22 years of your life, 18 of those 22 years in classrooms and stuff like that for the majority of the day. Like, yeah, it's a big shock to the system. But I think that was one of the biggest things for me. It's like, you are capable of blowing your own mind, and it's actually going to work out for you much better in the long run the quicker you do that. Because now that we did that at 22 and 23, we have the rest of our 20s to add on to that experience, and it just makes that experience that much sweeter, because we know that was the beginning, and that was the initial change that just led us to the next steps and the next steps and the next steps. And so when we're say 35, walk in the Great Wall of China, we know where that began from. And say when we're 65 and we've, who knows, like just done another big sale or even raised a family or, just developed a community that's really intent on freedom and helping each other out. Like we know where all those ideals and ideas rather were developed.
Yeah.
I think that just makes all of this a little bit sweeter too.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, I think, one, it was proving people wrong. Part of it though is just the proof of concept that you can do something, or for me, it was, I could do something that everyone thought was a bad idea, but that admitted that it sounded cool, but like that it was a bad idea and that I should be terrified. And to be frank, I mean, definitely, it was a scary adventure. Like I'm not going to elude or overshadow the fact that at times it was very scary. And I did have to face a lot of my fears head on, but it did prove to myself that I can do something that everyone else thinks is a horrible idea and has to end in disaster. And it just amazing and one of the most unique experiences of my life.
Yeah.
And once you have that confidence that just because everyone says something is a bad idea, once you have the confidence to say, no, but this is important for me, I can do it.
Right.
Filters into everything else. But so many people, maybe they have that same dream, but they hear a few people tell them, you shouldn't do this. Like, that's not smart. And then they may bail on it. And I was probably one of those people capable of bailing on those sort of ideas, until I decided to get on the boat anyway. And, like you said, I blew my own mind in combat and confronting all these fears, and nothing's been, I guess there's nothing more exciting or fulfilling than when you take a fear head on and realize that it was silly to have it to begin with.
Right. And I think that illuminates your threshold. It really defines the threshold of what's something that I'm capable of, because now when you have a pretty far-fetched idea, say it's even like a business idea or something, like, how hard you've pushed yourself before. So you'll have a much better idea of what it is you're capable of than you probably would have before. And yeah, when you were talking about people telling you that the idea was crazy, I remember specifically a couple friends from back home, if you could call them that, saying, like, once we were leaving for our long trip, I think this was the one from Puerto Rico to Dominican to the uninhabited island in Bahamas and then Florida. They were saying, why would we want to go on that sailboat? Like, it's hot and you're going to be sweaty, and like, we can just be comfortable here and our house is here. And I'm like, oh, that's exactly the reason why I want to go on that boat. Like, I've lived in this comfortable house my whole life, and I see how numb it's made me, and how, sure, great things can come from it, but for me at that particular time, that was the challenge that I needed. And yeah, super thankful for it, and glad we all did it. And yeah, and it's amazing, I think, to see now, like, with, say, Michael writing the book, and you doing the things that you've done since that sale, and myself as well, and us continually exploring afterwards. It's not like we let up after that sale, and we talk about that, but that was just a central event that kind of led us on our own paths and stuff like that. And I think we're, as of recent in particular, like, we're really understanding how we're going to each go our own ways after this. And, but there's, like you're saying, there's this central overlapping, like, theory or concept that, like, keeps us driven towards this idea of freedom and stuff like that, where all of our skills and the directions that we're pursuing are all coming back together and, really helping each other out. Which reminds me, like, recently I was talking to a big conservationist here in New Zealand. She's huge on conservation, and saying that that's what the human race needs, and that's what's going to solve our problems. And I'm huge on the government side, and reducing that whole influence. And it really made me think, like, even though she's going that direction and I'm going this direction, I think in the end, our ultimate goal is that we want the human species to all have the best lives possible. And not only that, to continue the human species in general. And so if we're all able to come together and see the ultimate goal, like, and we're going to work together as a team, as opposed to saying this particular way of doing it is the best, or this particular way of doing it is the best. And yeah, so I think, we're really realizing that as a group, and it's going to help us going forward.
Yeah, no, I think so much of it is empowering the individual to pursue their own passion and their creativity and their dreams, whereas what we've been brought up, I think Tyler is the first person I heard use this particular phrase at one of the book things, but he said like this prefabricated life, that
right.
that I think most developed nations probably this is true for, but I'll just speak for the US since that's the only thing I can really speak intelligently on as far as growing up there. But yeah, I mean, there's so much energy put into this is how it works. You go to school, you get your high school diploma if you can. If you're fortunate enough, you go to college, then you get a job, then everything you said, and it's like this very prefabricated life. And anytime you are tempted to step out of that, I think you're ostracized to some extent. I know I feel like I've experienced a lot of ostracism based on the fact that I did really well in school, and it kind of set up these expectations. I think it actually, if I had done not as well in college, I think it would have been easier for my loved ones around me and even my friends to accept the idea that I wasn't going to go down this normal path. But by doing so well in school, everyone, it reaffirmed everyone's expectations and made them very strong that like, oh, I was made to fit into the bubble. And anyway, I felt ostracized, and I still get, some of my family doesn't get it. Some of my friends definitely don't get it. Man, what's going on? And I think one of the core tenets of what we're about as a group, all of us that went on the sailing trip and that are trying to be a part of the Free Academy and whatnot, is just to empower the individual and to say that, yeah, I mean, think about what you want to do, what you're passionate about, and go for it. You can do it. We know you can do it. And don't let these people tell you that you're not capable of it. And if that was done on a grander scale, I think like we're missing out on so much ingenuity and innovation and creativity. And because if you don't fit into this box, you get ostracized instead of encouraging people to do what they see in their head. I think so. What you're saying about the conservationist, if you guys you're fighting for the same goal, but in different ways. She's passionate to such an extreme about this, right? But if we could just pursue or encourage everyone to find what they're passionate about or what their dreams are and just to go for them, everyone would accomplish more. But I feel like once you step outside of that box, there's no encouragement there. It's few and far between, as far as who's telling you and saying, yeah, you can do it. And I think we're just losing so much. We're losing passion. We're losing happiness. We're losing new innovative ideas because we're pushing people into this machine that just churns, and it's sad. And I think my biggest push, besides just the isolation of it to get on the boat, was I had already, had some internships, got horribly depressed. I realized I couldn't work in an office. Like it was just, I couldn't deal with it. And I was fighting against, this work-life balance that people have in the US. It didn't make sense to me. And I think I'm happier for not falling into that trap. But, if it works for some people, that's great. I just want to encourage people to do what they want and to take hold of their life and to organize it for themselves instead of relying on other people's expectations to figure out what they need to do.
Right. Yeah, I think, it's with the whole work-life balance thing. Like, if you don't bring it upon yourself to pursue your passion and kind of, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is that you're going to be used for somebody else's means. Like if you're not taking responsibility for your own biography and your own, your own passions, like you're saying, say,
make your biography an autobiography, control what's going on, instead of letting everyone else write it for you.
Yeah, exactly. Because like say, if you don't choose what it is you want to pursue in life, then you're just going to go accept a job that pays.
Yeah.
And maybe that job is at Amazon or something else. So you're just some sort of robot for the Amazon people and their passions. And therefore, like your passions just get smothered in the meantime. Like they don't, nobody's, and it's not necessarily their fault because you're the one who put yourself in that situation, who passively just floated in there and let somebody use your body in order for their, to be a means to their end.
Yeah.
So I think in that regard, it's not necessarily a bad thing to work for somebody. Like I work here in New Zealand for somebody, but I'm happy about it because our interests align, and I know what their long-term goals are, and they know what my long-term goals are, and we're both helping each other get to those goals and reach them. So it's not like in the process my passions are being smothered. If anything, they're being enhanced, and I'm helping them enhance their passion and reach their goals. So, I think it's literally that is one of the things of utmost importance in life is to take responsibility for your biography and find out what your passion is, even if it's ever changing, which it probably will be throughout your life. Just go for it and make sure that everything that you're doing in the meantime kind of supports this ultimate goal of yours.
Yeah. No, I think it's funny because people, I think, ask themselves so many questions like, okay, I'm 25, almost 26. Where should I be at in life? All these things. And they ask themselves, they evaluate religion. They ask themselves all these questions. I think a lot of people, my perception of a lot of people, I don't want to say it as a fact, but my perception is a lot of people don't ask themselves maybe the most important question, which is just, what do I want to get out of my life? Right. And I don't know. I'm operating my life so far post college with almost no plan. Like I'm kind of winging it, but there's a general theme that I know I want my life to represent, and anything in pursuit of that theme, I'm going for. But I don't have, next year I want to do this, this, and this. It's not scripted, but I have a main idea, and it took a while to craft that main idea. Once I realized I didn't want the normal work life, it was a very depressing realization because I was like, okay, I didn't feel like I had an example of an alternative lifestyle in my life. So I didn't know. I said, okay, I know I don't want this, but what's left? Like, what do I do? And crafting that main idea or that theme was really a very challenging question for me to answer. But I think it was the most important question for me to answer because, as you mentioned, if you don't put thought into what you want to get out of your life or, some basic principle like that, it's very easy to just float into a good paying job and then float. And before you know it, 5 years has passed, you're still there. You got a few promotions along the way. So you're making more money. It gets harder. I feel like it's easy to get sucked into, sucked into these life situations where you just float by, and before you know it, so much time has passed, and the longer you get sucked in, the harder it is to ever pull yourself out.
Right.
It's so dangerous. Like this black hole.
I think in particular for us, being in our 20s, like I read this book recently by Meg J. It's called The Defining Decade, and you can see her TED Talk online. But in popular media, all the 20-somethings, like it's advertised to us that our 30s are our new 20s, and that pretty much our 20s, they're just wasteful years, and you can do whatever you'd like with them. But I think that's so far from the truth. Like these are the years where you're literally building like identity capital and building up skills, so that by the time the clock strikes 30 and people are freaking out, rushing to have children or rushing to jump into careers, like you have built up skills that you can relax. You're 30, you're like you're making good coin, you've already kind of developed your passions and your interests, and what sort of line you want to follow, given that you've taken risk and kind of done some soul searching and stuff like that. And you're 30 years old and you're not having to work a job that you could have worked when you were 22 or 23. because you've already put in those hard yards at a young age and kind of worked your way up, you know? So I think that's kind of just a terrifying idea, to be 30 years old and being bossed around by like a 25 or 26-year-old when you know you could have been in that position at that age or earlier. So I think there's, something really important to be said about like taking this time to explore, and, you know, whether that's work related or travel related, but explore for a purpose, like you're saying, you know, kind of get a general idea of what it is you want in life and how you want to, you know, how you want to go about living your life, and what it is you want to accomplish during it. And, you know, go for it then.
Yeah. And I think it's okay to go off course of your theme, but I think it's just important to be cognizant of your theme enough to not let yourself get so far that you get sucked into that hole where, you know, you're just drifting by and time escapes. Right. And then you have that moment later in life where you probably start to realize that you got so off course that you didn't really make for yourself what you had hoped. And I see that in my friends, you know, and I worry for them, because when they hear about what I'm doing, they like some of my thoughts or whatever, or they see other people going on adventures or traveling or, you know, just doing whatever makes them happy. They see people around them that appear to be happy, and maybe they're missing out on some of that. I worry for them, because they'll admit to me, you know, I'm not really happy, or it's this, but it's so hard for them to pull themselves out, because now they've already sunk time in, and you know, I'm like, well, that's a sunk cost, but you gotta just worry about now moving forward. You know, are you on a path to where you think you'll get happy, or do you recognize that you're on a path where you're not going to like it? You know, because I'm all for putting in time, you know, and maybe sacrificing some happiness when you think you're positioning yourself for the future that you want.
Right.
But I have a lot of friends that will admit they're not really very happy now, and also when they project forward, they don't think they're really on track to be happy later. But it's still hard to pull out of that situation and figure out what they really want. And I think part of that is fear, because the fear of what if what you really want isn't what other people's want for you. You know, it goes back to my family. They had different expectations for me, and luckily they've become very supporting. At least my immediate family, but my extended family, you know, I still face ostracism about my actions, because it's not their concept of what a happy life is, and so they're not very supportive of it. That's the biggest fear I think I have, just getting sucked into that hole, you know, and that's why I think I'm so conscious, or I try to be, of what I want, because it's so easy to get sucked into that hole.
Yeah, no, I mean, you just raised a great point for me too. Like, whenever I stepped on those sailboats at 22, I wasn't necessarily the most happy 22-year-old, if that's even a thing. You know, you're usually pretty lost at that age, from what I hear. And but yeah, like, looking back on that, you know, it's clear and evident that at this point, having traveled extensively since, and having found, you know, come here and found a good job, found someone that that, like I said, my interests align with, that I'm working for, and I see a great future going forward. It's like, that's what a piece of that sale was for me. It was like, this is the beginning of me putting in the hard yards for me to be able to look back whenever I'm older and say, look, yeah, you know, I did it, and be proud of something that I did. Because at that point, 22 years old, like, all I had done was follow exactly what society had told me, you know, and I just, like I said, from 5 to 18 and in a government school, and then, you know, breaking out of religion was great for me at about like 16 years old. But then after that, you know, 18 to 22, getting essentially tricked into going to college and assuming that was a great thing for me, and then getting to the end of it and realizing, hey, that was such a waste of my time. It was at that point where I was like, look, you know, this is the first step I can take to directly butt heads with, you know, authority, just like I was talking about the whole theme of my childhood. And, you know, it's not guaranteed that it's going to be safe or anything like that, but, you know, this is your first opportunity to actually take a hold of your biography for yourself and give it a go and see how it works out. And Yeah, funny thing was, in the end, it worked out. It's just an exponential joy that seeps out of that situation. And yeah, I've these last couple years have just been amazing, and I'm excited to see where it goes from here. Like, look how passionate we are in our mid 20s about what we're doing, and just give it a little bit of time for us to collect more skills and more resources and more adventures. And yeah, it's going to be we're going to be really productive members of society, and really help push the bar in the areas that we're associated with. So I'm excited about that. And I want to say, now more than ever, like, do we need people like us in society? Because it's just, with all the news and everything that's happening, it's just crazy as ever. So
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest things I hope that's something about what I'm doing, and part of the reason I try and be outspoken about it. I broadcast on social media. One of the biggest reasons I'm doing that is because when I realized I didn't want what was expected of me, as I said earlier, I didn't really feel like I had a good example in my life of an alternative life, or of someone that I felt broke free of the mold and found what was, important to them. I actually did. I had Michael in my life, but we weren't that close at the time, so I didn't know, but I felt like I didn't have that example. And not to be grandiose about what I'm doing, I'm not doing anything special. I'm just kind of living a life and trying to find my own happiness and those sorts of things. But if any positive can come from it, and part of the reason I'm so vocal about it is maybe someone sees what I'm doing and it helps encourage them to soul search and maybe question what they really want, because it's easy emotions, because you're doing what everyone else is doing, and so you just assume it's what's right for you. But until you break free or have that moment of clarity where you say, what do I really want? It's just, I keep talking about it because it blows my mind, but just getting sucked into that vortex and not questioning it until so much time has passed. I think part of the reason I'm outspoken about it, the biggest, is I hope that maybe there's one person out there that hears something or whatever, and just, not that I'm special, but just I'm doing something a little bit different, and it encourages them to maybe consider or trust in themselves to do their own thing. You don't have to fall into the path. The other thing I wanted to say is, because I'm living below the poverty line for the most part, from an income standpoint. Michael is, a lot of us are, and I'm more than comfortable actually at this income level. I think I could be happy for a long time. But I was talking to my mom, because she still kind of hopes that in some way, shape, or form this is a phase, because she wants me to be financially successful and those things. I think that's natural for a parent to want that. And I was telling her, I was like, I'm not convinced, even though I'm basically choosing to be poor now, or that it doesn't mean I won't be financially successful later, because I'm following my passions and I'm surrounding myself with people who are doing the same thing. And when you do that, you're going to end up, I think, meeting people that are going to put you in a place to succeed. Whereas if I just become like a cog in the system, I'm just kind of getting by. And, if it's not something I'm passionate about, I feel like it's harder to make yourself economically successful when you're just trying to get by.
Right. And, and you can have economic success, but if you're reliant on somebody else for that all the time, then that in and of itself doesn't really define success to me. Like, I would like to, I would rather say, like, make 30, 40 grand a year, but be able to do it on my own terms and know that I'm doing it like I'm helping the world by doing what I'm doing, than make 60 or 70 just being a cog for somebody else and not necessarily gaining skills towards my ultimate goal. I want to say something real quick on what you said earlier, like being able to influence somebody by telling your story and being outspoken on social media. You put in the hard work to do what it is you did. And so even if it's not you influencing somebody right this moment, think when you have children or grandchildren, if that's something you want, like, just sharing that story with them and the generational ripple effect that these actions can have, you know, and taking control of your biography and autobiography, like you're saying. It's not that it has to pay off necessarily right now. It's great if it does, but you carry that with you for the rest of your life. And the people that really do latch onto that story, they tell people about you and they tell people about you. And so it's like you're a walking, I don't even know. It's like, it's just like this whole, it's like empowerment that radiates from you, you know, no matter where you go and no matter how old you are. So I think that's like, yeah, it's something that's really beneficial for a person's life. And to know, like, just to know that fact that that's what you are, it just makes you want to add on to that and keep going and keep going.
Yeah. I mean, it's just what you said about my thing. I'm so comfortable living off so little money that I know money's never going to be necessary for my happiness, which is a really awesome feeling.
Right.
But, you know, obviously more money is better and whatnot. But I liked what you said, which is that, you know, obviously I think sometimes people mistake my message that I don't want to do the normal work life and things like that as some sort of stance that, like, you know, making money is bad or something. That's clearly not my message or my beliefs or anything. It's more, money's not worth, you know, I don't want to sacrifice my freedom for money. There's not amount of money that trade-off's worth it, you know? So that's why, like you said, acquiring skills to where you can be your own economic engine and, you know, you have your own freedom. You know, I don't want to get caught in a thing where I'm making good money, but, like, you know, one of the biggest things, even if you don't mind the work-life balance traditionally in the US right now, where you know, maybe you don't even mind the Monday through Friday 8 to 5 thing. But I have friends that don't mind that, but then they want to take a trip and they're like, man, I only got a week of vacation. You know, it's like all these other strings attached.
Right.
That just make that not work for me. I don't want to be in a position where I'm financially capable to do a trip. You know, I have everything else is lined up and I could do this incredible thing that I'm really passionate about, but I can't because I don't have enough vacation days or something. You know, I just don't want to put myself in a situation that trade-off's never worth it. And I think that's why it's, for me, I wouldn't mind being used to help someone else achieve their ends. You know, obviously, you know, like you were saying, and I think you were talking about Brian, huh?
Yeah.
Helping each other out and pushing each other in some way, shape, or form, or inspiring each other in small ways here and there. I don't mind. You know, that relationship sounds great. It's just the money. There's not a price tag on my freedom, I guess, and I find the standard work life to be too big an encroachment on my freedom and my flexibility for it to be worthwhile to me at this point. Maybe I'll change my mind later, but
yeah. And I think at the same time, it's like, although you choose that, clearly you're like taking another route to try to make it work for you, because you know, there's people out there who want family and children and grandchildren, and you have to have resources in order to raise a family. Like, it's very expensive, and it would just be it would be very negligent to try to go into a situation and have your child, you know, camp in a tent with you or something like that because you're okay with not having coin and stuff like that. But yeah, so it's not like that. It's not like you're just saying, like, not have it, but don't put yourself in a situation that you don't enjoy or that you're not passionate about to, you know, in just for the cash. If it's not going to help you in the long run, if you're just going to have to restart later, or you're just going to suffer from depression, you know, this whole time going through life, which I really understand. It makes sense.
Don't get too far off your life's message for the sake of a little bit more money, you know, like.
Right. Yeah. And Stefan Molyneux puts that real well. He's saying, like, with families where both parents work and they put their child in daycare nonstop, you know, rent out your child to this person that they're paying $10 an hour. He's like, just downsize the house, you know, rent an apartment for a couple years. It only takes a couple years for this child to gain, you know, emotional clarity, and, you know, you just raise this child for 9 months in your belly. So at least keep that nurturing, that nurturing environment and that comfort around until the child is developed. And then you can, then go work for, more stability if that's something you need. But yeah, just like downsize in the meantime. It's in the long run, it's always going to be better to have spent the time as opposed to got a couple extra $1,000.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. They're basically outsourcing parenting.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what they're doing.
And that's
I was in a similar situation, and there's, it's strange not having that connection with your parent who, and my parents provided for me. They like, we never had to worry about food being on our plate or monetary struggles or anything like that. But at the same time, like, I was in daycare like a lot of the time. And so it's just kind of strange that was a thing. And if someone doesn't like speak up about it, it can just happen generationally too. There's still people out there who are putting their kids in daycare nonstop in government schools for that matter, and through churches, when we know, like, there's enough evidence to show this far that has, dismantled quite a few lives. But just people not speaking up doesn't help break the chain or change anything.
Yeah, and I do want to be sympathetic to the fact that obviously not everyone has the capacity to raise a child and not utilize daycare and whatnot. But if it's, especially single parents, like my mom, she really didn't have. My dad was, tremendous. He's always there for her. If she needed anything, he was there. So taking nothing away from that, but just if she was going to produce any income, she had to put me somewhere.
Right.
And, Dad, I guess, was doing the same. He had a business to run and whatnot. So there's instances where I get that it's a necessity, but if you're capable of not doing it, I'm sure it makes a huge impact on the child.
Yeah.
But so you're in New Zealand now, kind of doing your thing. We went on the sailing trip. I guess to fill in the gaps between the sailing trip and now, well, one of the things I did recently, which is what I'm writing my book about, and it's referenced a little bit in the end of Mike's book, is living in the woods here in Austin. So to fill people in on that, after the sailing trip, there's some other travels in there. Ended up in Dallas for a few years to try and family health problems and just one thing led to another, and I ended up being in Dallas for a while. But escaped from that, and then went and moved into the woods in Austin with Michael, and it was an awesome adventure. We both lived in that particular woods for about 5 months, and it was a real cool adventure. It was a way for me to, I think, finally put to test. I've always been into minimalism, and I've talked a lot about it. I think I was like a keyboard minimalist, where I wrote a lot about it, but I don't think I really lived it very well. And I wanted to put it to the test and find out if I was full of shit or not, and see what's the bare minimum amount of things materially that I can have in my life and still be happy. And there was that, and there's a lot of other lessons, and there's certainly some philosophical and political things that I was, or apolitical, I guess I should say, things that I was trying to test as well. But that was one of the biggest. It was an awesome experience, and so I'm writing a book about that experience, and why the hell at age 25 I thought that'd be a cool idea, and what I meant and whatnot. So that was cool. But that's basically in a nutshell what I've been up to. You went on some travels post sailing trip that ultimately led you to meeting some cool people in New Zealand and staying there for a while. You want to go into that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So I was immediately after we got back from the sails, I think it was November or something like that. And so I spent Thanksgiving and Christmas in Texas, and it was kind of anticlimactic, honestly. We showed up after having just sailed for a month. We were pretty much starving for like the last week. We spent a week on an uninhabited island, and just the most amazing stars and sunsets, and then we get home, and it's real nice for us to be home for the first couple days, and then it's like, I'm gonna go go to work or what, you know? So
I definitely
anticlimactic. But after that, I kind of knew. I was like, you know, all right, well, Texas, I've only lived in Texas my entire life. So I think it's about time to branch out and just see what's out there.
Yeah.
So I'm fortunate enough to move in with my cousin who lives out in Northern California in Lake Tahoe. And I spent some time out there just exploring, and it was nice living in an area where there's just extreme beauty. And we would go hiking in the mountains, which is something that I hold dear to me to this day. Like I've done tons of hiking since, and I never really got into hiking until then. So yeah, that's been really beneficial for me. And now, like when I look into travels, hiking is something that I'm not going to cities anymore. I'm going to hike places or just pursue other activities that interest me now. And then shortly afterwards, I had the benefit of meeting up with another one of my friends from college, and he has an uncle who has a salmon fishing lodge out in Alaska. And so I stayed in Alaska with him for about a month and a half. And I think it was at that point, really a little like towards the end of California, when I saw that me living in California wasn't really going anywhere. In this particular area, it was just people working, doing tourist jobs roughly, just to live in that area. And, the extreme beauty was great, and that's something that I wanted in my life, but I wasn't going to work some underpaid job just to stay there. I wanted the best of both worlds, essentially. So yeah, I went off to Alaska and, So yeah, at the end of California, I kind of said, well, I guess I'll just go on the run again. There's tons of the world that I still haven't seen. And all of the trips that I had done thus far had been in big groups. So I was ready to do something alone and have another similar challenge, similar to the sailboat, just get out there alone and see what I can make happen, essentially. I had gotten into meditation. So there was just so happened to be a Vipassana meditation retreat out there. So I was like, all right, well, that's it. I'm going to New Zealand. So I get out to New Zealand after my Alaska trip, and eventually I win this. Well, so I'm hitchhiking and I get picked up by this Maori elder, and Maori are the indigenous people here in New Zealand. And he's telling me about the financial woes and how the Europeans, essentially came in and put them under their monetary paradigm. And so I'm just thinking like, well, Bitcoin had just recently blown up. And so I'm just like, well, why don't y'all put y'all's money into Bitcoin? So anyways, I start Googling that night at his house about Bitcoin New Zealand. And sure enough, the first ever Bitcoin conference in New Zealand was happening like a couple months from when I Googled that. And I asked about it on meetup.com, and a guy got back to me the next day and said, hey, we're offering scholarships if you're interested. And so I applied. I sent him an email telling him why I was interested and just talking about the fiat money paradigm and whatnot. And he hit me up a couple days later and said, hey, you want it. And so he tells me I actually start doing a little bit of freelance work for him on the computer like a couple weeks later. And he said, he sent me a link one day and it's like, check out this guy's website. He's the one who will be covering your scholarship, and he's who I'm working with currently. And I look at the website on the About Me page, and it's a guy that had donated for us to do our sailing adventure through Puerto Rico, because we ran a GoFundMe online ad campaign. And so when I found that out, man, that was really strange. It was just like a whole full circle event. So yeah, I ended up meeting up with this guy at the Bitcoin conference, and he was real cool and a really interesting person in general too. And was fortunate enough to offer me a position out here because I was just kind of trying to get away from the whole U.S. paradigm and the American dream in general. And since then I've been out here and I'm living out here and working out here, going to school out here currently, doing a program in sustainability practice. So I'm learning a lot about horticulture as well as sustainability in general, which I think, is crucial as far as the earth goes. But also it's made me think a lot more about the sustainability of the human species and how we're going to go about, finding our way off this planet before, you know, the 4.5 billion year mark comes up and we get too close to the sun. So yeah, that's kind of, you know, long story short, that's how I ended up here in New Zealand.
Man, that's crazy. I didn't realize that that he had funded the GoFundMe for the sailing trip to Little.
Yeah. He donated us what was it, like $260 or something like that,
You just
for
stumbled.
a satellite phone. And you know, he's done some investing before too, and they've been you know, some investments haven't turned out so well. And it was funny, one day I said to him, like, you know, you won't understand that what you did for us, all you had to do was give 4 little kids $260 and look how far it's gone, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's quite interesting. So yeah, it's, you know, we'll see where all of this takes me going forward. And yeah, it's nice to you know, nice to be associated with some business and have that as well in my life, you know, because it's just another area of pursuit. I really want to, you know, be able to gain resources for myself while doing something, you know, providing a valuable service, but then taking some of those resources and, you know, doing exactly what he did to us, just giving it to kids who are clearly putting themselves out there and trying to make things happen in life. Kids or older people, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's got me real excited for,
No,
you know, forward.
goes back to what we were saying before. You know, I think in all of us in some way, shape, or form, I think are hoping. You know, me, Michael, you, Tyler, Ben. You know, we're all hoping to just encourage others. You know, Daniel, Julian, whatever, to do what they want to do and to find their, you know, our goal is just to help encourage other people to do what they want to do and to explore their own version of freedom and to identify what life is to them and to go for it. And I mean, I just think what you're doing in New Zealand is so awesome. And I know all of us have been talking about trying to find some time to get out there. Ideally sometime where we can all get out there together. 'Cause, you know, we've met up now in person and we're all kind of like go our own way and do our own thing. But we seem like we're going to have these times where we all end up regrouping. And Austin has been one of those cities where we, you know, a lot of us, you know, found a way to regroup here and touch base. And I'm sure we're on that stage where we're all kind of slowly drifting back out into the world. And then you know, we're going to find a way to reconnect. But we've been talking about heading out to New Zealand. I think sometime around May-ish has been thrown around. So hopefully we get out there.
Yeah, man, that'll be sweet. Yeah, it's cool to see, you know, with everybody going their own ways. It's been so damn interesting to see how we've penetrated almost like the mainstream of the whole freedom movement in general, you know, like with you guys and Brave New Books out in Austin and Mike at Anarchapulco and me out here in New Zealand. Yeah, and that's like only the beginning of it too. Like it's going to be just, yeah, it gets me so excited to think about the future of it all. And you know, like we're saying, once we gain more skills and more resources and we're able to help other people out to get to the same position, like, yeah, it's quite exciting to look forward to. And yeah.
No, it's awesome. You know, and that's one of the coolest things about the freedom movement is how accessible everyone seems to be, you know, in the movement. You know, it's just everyone's so excited to have other people opening their eyes to freedom and individuality that everyone I've tried to reach out to or interact with, no matter how well known, has been incredibly responsive and, you know, open to helping. And it's my favorite. It's probably my favorite part about the movement is just, you know, the ideas that lead people to it are great, but then to see that they come through and, you know, help thy neighbor sort of very giving culture that it has for the most part. I mean, obviously I'm sure there's some people in there that aren't as giving, but my experience has been, you know, even the most well-known of names are incredibly accessible, you know, at the push of an email or a phone call. Right. And, you know, I feel like we're finally getting, as you said, we're starting to meet some of the people that are more well-known in the movement. And it's just been amazing to get involved with them, and hopefully, we can all do something to further it. But
right, and all the new experiments that we're on the cusp of, with say like encryption as well as like Bitcoins and all the different altcoins coming out. Yeah, it's just been insane. Like I was saying at the very beginning of this talk, when I was thinking, say when I was 18 and thinking about what my life would be, just get a good job and then a wife and the house and the kids and everything. Like,
yeah,
never could have even remotely imagined that I'd be involved with Bitcoin, and just like the idea of turning our current ideas of money inside out. And yeah, and not only that, like I'm real involved here in like local food movement and getting all my food from in this region, and none of it having herbicides or pesticides or any steroids or anything like that. Like, and to be able to feel the effects of that too, and like recognize every time I eat, how much of a ripple effect that has. Like it just makes life so much more rewarding and so much more rich.
yeah,
Than I could have ever imagined. So yeah, and yeah, just great, man.
yeah, man. Well, it's been awesome talking to you. Glad we were able to hop on this call, and I feel like this is a good place to leave it. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so, man. I think so.
Awesome.
Until the next episode.
Peace, love, and anarchy.
Yeah, see ya.